There's some miles to make you all feel better. Sorry about that. I realized I forgot to set the title. I'm a little behind right now, guys. I'm kind of saying that to nobody. You know, for everybody to get back online. Only now since I'm not anywhere. Oh no. Okay, we're back again. Okay. Are we out there? I confused myself now. Okay, it looks like we're moving. Oh yeah, okay. It's a little unclear over on the restream page whether we're back or what. Miles. Hey Don, hey Steve, Betsy, Timothy, Gladys, Octavio, hey Marie. Hey everybody. Hey Don. Hey there. Miles making his appearance already. He's been hiding out in a linen closet for a while. Just gonna hang here, Miles. Okay. Hey everybody. This is the producer, Miles, yeah. Hey, Bridget, Mary Jo. Howdy, Kathleen. Hey, Dad. Oh, I've got the wrong begins button up here, too. Hang on. Yeah, there we go. You can see I'm real prepared tonight. Hey, Tracy. Hey, Eileen. Ethan Gregory. Hey, Karen. Hey, David. Hey, Laura. Hey, Ryder and Aaron. Hey, Marine.
Now Helen Ward has an antidote for the blues. I'm shooting.
Hey, Gene over on Twitch. Hey, Joanne. Hey, Barbara. Evening, everybody. Hey, Euphonium section. Hey, Gwendolyn. Hope you're feeling better. Good research today? Yes and no. Yes, I found exactly the case I was hoping I would, but apparently there's some kind of staffing issue. It's going to be a long time before they actually get me the file. But I found it. I found it in the index, and I bet it's going to be juicy AF. Hey, Susan and Cindy. Hey, Vicky, Scott. Nah, nobody's late. Miles have been hanging out in his spot in the linen closet. Hey, Mom. Yeah, I started and then restarted a bit today. On account of... I forgot to update the title, that's all it is. It's just, me acting a fool. Hey, Bob. Hey, Jay. Alright, if you didn't come in right at 7:50, you wouldn't have noticed anything. But for about 45 seconds, I was live with the wrong title. Well, that's just embarrassing. But it's on me. Also, I didn't have as much new footage for this tour as I thought I did. So, we'll just do it regular. I've had an expensive kind of day. Rent, socks, tickets to Minnesota, tickets to Metallica. It all kind of stacks up. But, cool stuff all around. I get this apartment for another month. I get to take Aiden to Metallica in just in a slightly less than 2 years. It will have been just a little over 30 years since my first Metallica concert by then. Drink. Hey, Katie. Good seeing you on TV, Katie. Hey, Timberley. Hey, Casey and Cindy.
The National Broadcasting Company is presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in
Julianne.
downtown Chicago. And now a special, Big
Hey,
Joseph
Beth.
special by Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
But tomorrow's Holmes and Hawk and Company tier post on the Patreon will all be about the Hawk wife that I've been researching this week. Just found some really good, a really good lead on what promises to be some very juicy data about her. It'll be a while till I actually see it, though. But it's been a very good week. I've been in like 5 different archives this week. Scored stuff from the State Archives, scored stuff from the State Repository. Scored stuff from the Legal Archives, or at least got a lead. Got some good stuff in the microfilm room. Hey, Christy. Plus all the newspaper archives and vinyl record stuffs. Always got that. That's an everyday kind of thing. Again, I'm sure they all appreciated it, though. Is there a troll here? Oh, no, okay. Katie just got a mystery package. Okay. Hey, Grandma Belle. See you out there. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Bala. Hey, Diane. Hey, everybody and all around. Hey, June. I am glad you're enjoying it. Tomorrow I might just post what I've been drafting up for the book. Honestly. It's either than just rewriting the whole thing, I guess. Now, Karen, I haven't seen them since the 90s. I saw them a few times between 94 and 98. But haven't seen them since, and I've kind of regretted it. But, you know, gee, it's a 2-day pass for $90. It's nosebleed seats, but still, how do you get a... Who does 2 days, 2 concerts back-to-back for $90 total anymore? Plus, there were discounted tickets for fans under 16. That's awesome. It is December 1st, yeah. Donna, we are really live. You're really here. We'll let Benny Goodman do a little bit more. Granted, we're going to be way up in the back. Well, that's alright. It's a big stadium show. I don't know. The first time I saw Metallica, I had to bring my grades way up to be allowed to go. I did so much extra credit for the rest of 7th grade. And I just feel like I should be doing some extra homework. Right? I remember I wrote like an extra 10-page report on ghosts. And one on primate communication, like apes who learn sign language and stuff. Alright, we'll let Benny do one more tune here. Hey, Jacqueline. Hey, Paula. Hey, Denise. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Doreen. David, I've spent a lot of time in the archives lately. It's like a different archive every day this week. Tuesday I was at the, Tuesday was the microfilm room. Yesterday was a state record depository. Today was the legal archives. And also on Monday I got an email from the state archives down in Springfield. So many good things this week. Hey, Arlie. I am just briefly here going to put up a different photo in the background. I've been watching the news all day. I don't know if you've all been following the news. Kanye's appearance on InfoWars. So check on your friends, we're not all okay. We're letting Benny Goodman finish up one more song, then we will go ahead and get started, everybody. We'll just kind of put that up there for a second. You know. All right, welcome along, everybody. Yeah, Kanye had already been at like a level 9. Now he's up at about a 20. Honestly, I'm not even really sure that they have kosher dogs there. They have a vegan dog that just doesn't have the hot dog in it. All right, that's Benny Goodman wrapping up, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, that's a half episode, I guess. I wonder why I wasn't opening with Let's Dance. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome along. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I'm a historian and tour guide here in Chicago, have been for going on 20 years now. Got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, which much to my surprise came out on audiobook this past week. Also, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, the now rare collector's item, Ghosts of Chicago, and recently, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. Cemetery research is one of my favorite things to do. Cemetery tours are one of my favorite things to run. And we do these things all the time. One I haven't quite gotten done yet. I wasn't quite able to list a walking tour at Oakwood Cemetery just yet this year. I'm very, very close. I've got one just about ready. I just never really found a weekend where it would work to try it out. But we got a novel. We do have stuff to do it as a virtual tour. So Oakwood Cemetery is down on the south side of Chicago. Paperwork was done to open it before Graceland or Rose Hill even started up, but burials didn't start till 4 or 5 years later after the Civil War. Built on land, I believe, that they purchased from Charles Volney Dyer, who we'll cover in just a couple of minutes here. Let's go ahead and walk right inside to Oakwood Cemetery. Now, they got some interesting things set up here. This is one of the cemeteries where they have just random monuments or just random relics from history. This is actually a relic of the Great Chicago Fire. It's probably all that was left of a store or something like that. There are lots of little melted bits. Like a more famous bit of it is it used to be back behind the Chicago History Museum, hidden in the bushes. Now they've got a much bigger display for it here. It's like all that was left of a hardware store after the Great Chicago Fire. And from here, we're going to move on up and go to Sunset Boulevard. I saw that show, but I can't really sing it, the Broadway version. All right. Now, there are signs all up around this place. If I actually move back a little bit. Signs up for as is common at Dignity Memorial-owned cemeteries. No loud music, no dogs allowed, service dogs only, no alcohol, no illegal substances, and no barbecuing. But should you feel like breaking the rules, they do in fact have a barbecue space set up for you here at Oakwood Cemetery. Cemeteries historically have been a place to picnic, and I think that's something we should be bringing back, honestly. And I did just recently find this feared ghost fled holdup man. Some guy was walking along beside Oakwood Cemetery, thought that there was a ghost showing up. It was really a guy planning to hold him up. But the fear kind of paid off. He ran away and got loose. And we just kind of look around the pond here a little bit. There's a couple of ponds here. But right around the edge is the guy who made quite a lot of the gravestones here, Elmo Tombstone Williams. Tombstone Williams ran the Tombstone Service place, Elmo's Tombstone Service. They had a classic catchphrase, "Before you go, call Elmo." And even now, the company is still in business. They still do all of their carving by hand, which lasts quite a bit longer. Laser cut is much more common these days. But hand carving is still something that's going to last you a lot longer. I don't want to turn into a salesman here or anything. We'll just move along a little bit. Down along the pond, I bet one of the many prominent Farwells in Chicago history. Perhaps the tallest of the obelisks, the kind of thing you could specifically ask for back before the days of Sigmund Freud, and no one would think it was hilarious. Well, first we've got William Hale Thompson Sr. Well, this is William Hale Thompson Sr. right here, one of the best sets of mustaches ever seen in Chicago. Or anywhere. These can basically not be improved on. But Colonel William Hale Thompson was the father of Big Bill Thompson, who was mayor of Chicago for a while in the 1910s, then again in the 1920s. Now, he's kind of a tragic figure. This guy had the tools for greatness, but he threw them all away for moronic buffoonery. This was a guy who, especially in the 1920s, later on, based his entire campaigns around ridiculous bigotry and prejudice, making promises to throw out all the pro-British history books in the libraries, having public book burnings, hosting debates with his opponents, where instead of the opponents coming in, he'd have rats in cages labeled with the names of his opponents. Was also thought to be on the payroll of Al Capone, which is almost certainly possible. He was, Capone had a lot of people on the payroll. Sheriff Hoffman was probably on his payroll, had been on several people's payroll for a long time, since back when he was coroner, in fact. But he's went down in history eventually as perhaps the most corrupt mayor we ever had in Chicago, which of course is saying something. When he was finally voted out of office in the early 1930s, I'll just read a little bit of the Chicago Tribune's farewell to Big Bill Thompson. I love this. For Chicago, Thompson has meant filth, corruption, obscenity, idiocy, and bankruptcy. He has given the city an international reputation for moronic buffoonery, barbaric crime, triumphant hoodlumism, unchecked graft, and a dejected citizenship. He nearly ruined the property and completely destroyed the pride of the city. He made Chicago a byword for the collapse of American civilization. In his attempt to continue he excelled himself as a liar and defamer of character. He's out. He is not only out, but he is dishonored. He is deserted by his friends. He is permanently marked by the evidence of his character and conduct. His health is impaired by his ways of life, and he leaves office and goes from the city the most discredited man who ever held place in it. You just feel like you want a cigarette after that. I've never once been a smoker, but I really feel like we need a cigarette after reading that. And the Tribune was openly a member of Thompson's own political party, and at various times had supported his election for mayor. But then the guy had to go and make a gigantic fool out of himself. We'll move on from here. But there's another mayor right up the road from him who's a little bit better regarded. Just coming up the road, we've got Harold Washington. And as of the early 1980s, when Harold Washington was first elected mayor, we were still, and we still really are, but even more so back then, we were just known as the Al Capone town. And he just made that a part of his appeal. When he was running for office, he said people around the world used to say, Chicago, Al Capone, bang, bang. Now they say, how's Harold? We'll move on to it. I will point out, though, he was not in favor of the World's Fair of 1992. We were supposed to have a whole other World's Fair in 1992. There were plans in foot for it. We had approval for it. But it just never really came together due to lack of money and, frankly, lack of interest. He was kind of the one who ended up putting the kibosh on the whole thing. We'll move a little bit further down in the back direction. You can see Big Bill in the background here. This is kind of the fun thing about virtual stuff, is I can hop around to places that I wouldn't normally get to. This is Calvin DeWolf. who was part of the abolitionist crew in Chicago. We had a really tight-knit group of abolitionists operating in Chicago in the 1840s and 1850s, and on up to 1860. Calvin DeWolf appears quite a lot in the Free West, an abolitionist newspaper that has just been digitized and is now fully searchable, so if I didn't have so much else to do, I'd be spending days and days digging through that. But Calvin DeWolf was probably best known for his involvement in the Eliza Grayson case. Eliza Grayson was a woman who had been enslaved by a man named Stephen Knuckles out in Nebraska. This was a time when there was all the debate about whether we should make Kansas and Nebraska slave states or free states or what. But even in Nebraska, there were only a very small number of enslaved people, really. But one of those was Eliza Grayson, who escaped and ended up working as a domestic, doing chores around a house of ill repute. But she talked a little too freely about her situation, and a couple of the women who worked there contacted Stephen Knuckles hoping to get the award money. So he showed up and tried to kidnap her, but Calvin DeWolf was among the people who helped put a stop to it. What he did was he had both Eliza and Stephen Knuckles arrested. Mainly, this was just so they could both be put in the lockup, and once Stephen Knuckles was in the lockup, as long as they unlocked Eliza's cell, she would have no trouble escaping, which is what she did. We don't really know whatever happened to Eliza Grayson in the end. We know that she got away from Stephen Knuckles that time anyway, and we know that he never got her back. But there is now a park named after him in Nebraska. Let's move on a bit. I guess in Nebraska, they don't really stop to think about stuff like that. Speaking of the abolitionist community, one of their leaders was the guy who I believe sold them the land for this cemetery. A guy by the name of Charles Volney Dyer. He came to Chicago in the late 1830s working as a surgeon. He and Levi Boone, a guy of whom he was diametrically opposed politically, but happened to be the other doctor in town, were the people who dissected the body of John Stone, the first murderer who was hanged in Chicago. But Dyer was so active in the Underground Railroad that he was actually sometimes referred to as the president of the Underground Railroad. Now, my favorite anecdote about him, and out of many to pick, but my favorite is the time that he was having breakfast in his office. Somebody came running in saying, "Sir, that guy you were helping escape, some slave catchers from down south have got him. They've got him holed up in the Mansion House Hotel." So he left his breakfast, walked to the hotel, went to the room where they were, found that they had the guy all tied up, and he stepped in saying, "All right, the gig's up." And they said, "Sir, you are interfering with our domestic institutions." And he brandished his cane and said, "You are interfering with my breakfast," and busted his cane over the guy's head. At which point he was able to make his escape. It's very difficult to believe that the Indiana Jones aspect of this could possibly be true, but it was reported fairly soon after it happened, and it was widely reported that the abolitionists of the city got together and ordered him a new cane. In fact, that new cane is still in the collection of the Chicago History Museum. They don't have it out on display. They've got it in off-site storage someplace, but they've still got it, and I really wish they'd put that one out just because I love that story so much. Charles Volney Dyer and the Dial of Destiny. The Dyer of Destiny. That paved the way, of course, for right a little bit further down his end of the pond, is the mausoleum for Roland Burris, who is probably best known around Chicago today for being the guy that Blago appointed to replace Obama's Senate seat following much controversy and shenanigans. But he has got this mausoleum with all of his various accomplishments. It doesn't mention the first appointed black senator from Illinois. First appointed rather than elected. Trailblazer, first African-American in Illinois to become Illinois Attorney General, Illinois State Comptroller, Vice President of Continental Illinois National Bank, etc., etc., etc. It should be noted Roland Burris is still alive. He has bought this mausoleum pre-need, which I think is awesome when people do that. Take some control, you get to control how you're going to be remembered. So often people just get a headstone that just says loyal or husband or wife more often. If there's things you want to be remembered for, that's kind of on you to take control of that. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story, you don't really get to control, but you can try to steer the ship a little bit. Now, he kind of gets overshadowed, though. All of this, some people could say that it's really remarkably vain to have something like this built to yourself while you're still alive. That's just something you have to deal with. But he's also right across the path from a hero who kind of overshadows him. Jesse Owens, who won 4 gold medals in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. He was the most successful athlete there, and this is at a time when, Hitler really planned to use those Olympics to show off the superiority of the Germans, the superiority of the Aryan race. And then here, the biggest, most successful athlete there was Jesse Owens. Just a little clip of this here. From Pathé, the newsreel organization. And they're off. Look at how far ahead of everybody else he is.
As he wins the final and equals the world's record time. This and his later victory in the long jump may well be
this was absolutely humiliating for Hitler.
And now the final
Though he noted at the time when after all the stories about Hitler, I still couldn't ride in the front of the bus back at home. I couldn't live where I wanted to, and sure, I wasn't invited to shake hands with Hitler, but at the same time, I also wasn't brought to the White House to meet with the president either. Eventually, President Ford gave him the Medal of Freedom. George H.W. Bush the First, gave him the Medal of Honor a decade after his death. Despite being an athlete, he was also a pack-a-day smoker, died fairly young at the age of 66. Well, back over here, really just for the, just kind of for the location, down here in the southeast section of the cemetery. And there's this fascinating monument to a few people who got killed in a grain elevator blast. In 1939, grain elevators were phenomenally dangerous places. This was a thing of the worst blaze in about 8 years, but these things happened quite a bit. It was the Rosenbaum and Brothers Grain Company down on 102nd in the Calumet River. There was a dust explosion inside of the silo, the kind of thing that happens sometimes, that knocked out windows for several blocks. It was very hard to put the fire out because if the firemen tried to shoot water at it, the water would evaporate, turn into steam as soon as it hit the flames. All they could really do is kind of let it burn itself out. The burial was several months later. The 4 people could not be identified separately, so they're given sort of a group grave over here. That was the 10th such explosion. It was the biggest in a while, but it was the 10th big one in the last 18 years. Others weren't quite as deadly. But across the country during that period, they killed about 300 people. These invisible dust particles would gather up. They wouldn't be visible. You couldn't see a thing, but they were flammable. And they'd be densely packed into this grain elevator. So just a tiny bit of flame would spark this huge chain reaction. And also, if you point your attention up to the back wall there, you can see the Citgo station. That represents approximately the location of the Granada Cafe, where back in the 1920s, there was a radio broadcast. WBBM was broadcasting live from this place. And I was on WBBM just earlier this year. I told you got to dig into this story more, because they didn't seem to know about it offhand. But they were broadcasting live. Gar Lombardi was playing a New Year's Eve party, and all of a sudden a couple of gunmen came in and killed a couple of gangsters named Stubby McGovern and Gunner McFadden. Nobody could really figure out a motive. They just kind of waltzed in, shot the guys, and waltzed out. But the radio had been broadcasting that night, and the next day there were all these stories from people who swore that they heard the murder live on the radio. According to WBBM, they weren't actually broadcasting live at the time the shooting took place. People probably just heard some drums or something. But if the audio survived, it would have been considered the first radio murder. I don't think the audio of that survives. A remarkable amount of old radio broadcasts do still survive, but not that show. Let's move on over here a little bit. Speaking of gangsters, let's say hi to Big Jim. Big Jim Colosimo was the vice lord of Chicago back in the 1910s. If you ran a numbers racket or a brothel or something, you were probably making payments to Big Jim for protection. But then 1920 rolled around, Prohibition started, and he had just gotten married. He had left his old wife, Victoria, who was very mad at him to the point that some people thought she might want him dead, and married a woman who was a chorus girl in his cafe, a woman named by the name of Dale Winter. So, Prohibition came around, and he's alleged to have said, boys, I want to straighten up and fly right. I just got married. She wants me to clean up my act, so we're not going to do bootleg liquor in this town. Not to mention, we're talking the feds, not local cops now. They're a lot harder to pay off. But this made him a target for every other gangster who realized that Prohibition was going to make it was like brewing their own money, really. So he was shot to death in his cafe. The official story is that it was a gangster named Frankie Yale, Capone's old mentor, had been brought in from New York to do the hit. Frankly, I've always kind of doubted it just because Frankie Yale was on a level within the gangs that he should have been above going all the way to Chicago to do a quick job like that. But it does make sense that they'd want to bring in somebody from out of town who would be less likely to be recognized around Chicago. But you can kind of see here the door is all bent out of shape, as though somebody had tried to bust in. Apparently somebody did. He was given one of those massive gangster funerals. There was reportedly a $12,000 bronze casket. That was $12,000 in 1920 money. So apparently somebody tried to break in, and here's where it gets especially amusing. As you can see there on the slab, as it focuses, James Colosimo, 1870 to 1919. Which is weird because he died in 1920. And it wasn't like on New Year's Eve or anything either. It was May of 1920. That's not in dispute. We've got the death certificate. We've got all the news reports. Typos on gravestones are really a lot more common than you would think. But not from Elmo. If only Colosimo had thought to call Elmo. Now, just recently we were out there at Mystericon. Somebody noticed that down on the floor of the place, somebody has tossed some bullets into there. I assume it was somebody tossed some bullets into there and not some kind of like zombie gang war. He's not the only gangster in the neighborhood either. That's how I'd sell it to him if I was a realtor. You wouldn't even be the only gangster in the neighborhood. Greasy Thumb Guzik lives right up the road. All right, this is a non-sectarian cemetery. People of all faiths can be and are buried in here. Among the Jews buried here is Greasy Thumb Guzik, who was a bookkeeper for Al Capone. Now, early on, he had overheard a plot to murder Capone and ratted the people out. He became kind of the treasurer of the entire Chicago outfit at the time. He was called Greasy Thumb because he was the guy who was known as the fixer. He was the guy who was greasing the rails. And he lived to a ripe old age compared to most of the gangsters. He died of a heart attack at the age of 69. Which is very, very old for a gangster. Not a lot of these guys really got anywhere. He was only a year shy of his 70, which not a lot of gangsters actually made it to the 70. But down to the southern section of the cemetery is also a whole Jewish section controlled by a few synagogues that have now long since moved away. And this is where we do our cleanup every year now. It's recently been weed whacked. Finally. So mostly we just had litter to clean up when we went in there recently. But Dignity Memorial, the company that owns the cemetery, does not own this section of it. So it's only occasionally they feel the need to clean it up in here. But among the people here, one of the larger ones, when you first come in, the larger mausoleum is a metalworking guy named Selig Morris. And as I mentioned, at Mystericon, every fall we do a cleanup out here. So here's the before shot from the 2021 Mystericon, and there's after. We made quite a dent in it. And here's our group photo from right across the way of the cleanup crew. I'll let that linger for a second. It's in much better shape right now. It has been cleaned up quite a bit more. And from here we'll move across the street from here, though, where we took the picture. Also happens to be a significant spot. That is a good-looking crew, isn't it? Across here, I wish I could find a picture of this person. This is Dr. Holton, Dr. E.S. Holton, who is best known for having sold her pharmacy and become a rumored victim of H.H. Holmes, the Devil in the White City guy. There was a picture of him right here. Well, we all know what he looks like. Bowler hat, mustache. H.H. Holmes is, most of the books about Holmes say that when he first moved to Chicago, he got a job in Dr. Holton's pharmacy, and that Dr. Holton was an old man who was slowly dying of cancer upstairs, so his poor hapless wife was only too happy to hire this energetic young go-getter. And really, that doesn't actually add up. Dr. Holton was not an old man. She was a young woman who had been at the University of Michigan a year before Holmes was. But this tends to be how they retell the story. There's not too much that we really know about her. I just know that she She did sell the pharmacy to H.H. Holmes, but remained in the neighborhood, and as you can see, lived well into the 20th century. So did her husband, who had some kind of a job on the railway. So Holmes is off the hook for this one anyway. But while we're on the subject here, first we got this genius. Right near the genius is the former police chief inspector and later police chief, George M. Shippey, who was frankly a total weirdo. This guy became chief of police but had a reputation for what you might call unorthodox methods. Like there was a murder. He decided he would rent the horse that the murdered man had had a couple of days beforehand and see if the horse would become magic and take him to where the murderer was. It didn't work. When that didn't work in the same case, he just propped the body up in a mausoleum and brought in the suspects one after the other to have the corpse point at them. Whether this was even possible, I've talked to a couple of morticians. They say it wouldn't have been pleasant at the very least for somebody to actually set the body up like this. It would have been very difficult. The whole thing might have fallen apart. But the idea was he had it set up so that it was pointing, and they thought if he would bring in the suspects one after the other, one of them would freak out and confess. Whether it was even the right person didn't really matter to him very much. But a couple of years after that case, Mr. Shippey became chief of police. One day, a guy named Lazarus Averbuck came knocking at his door. We don't really know what Lazarus Averbuck wanted there. Shippey just thought he looks Jewish and therefore he might be a terrorist, so he must be here to kill me, and he shot Lazarus Averbuck to death. Now, he was cleared of any wrongdoing. They determined it was self-defense, but whether this was an honest investigation is probably a whole other thing. In any case, Shippey was starting to feel the effects of mental deterioration at the time, probably due to syphilis, so he would never spend another day on the force. He died in an asylum a few years later. But he's actually at his workplace here where he is buried. He actually did some work here at Oakwood Cemetery, just across the way from where he is. In this section over here that is largely filled with unmarked graves. But amongst these unmarked graves is a woman by the name of Marie Walker Hawk. And, check this out. I got the coroner's inquest report on her yesterday. One day soon that'll be up on the Patreon. But Marie Walker Hawk grew up in Germany, spent a couple of years in the United States, and then went back to Germany. She was married with kids there, but according to her sister, she left her husband 19 times. And finally left him for good coming to the United States in about 1891 or in about 1901 or 1902, having been out of the country for about 10 years by then. But living by herself, operating a candy shop, she answered a personal ad in the matrimonial section of the Abendpost, the Chicago Evening Post in German. It was a guy saying, "Hey, it's me, early 30s, I own my own business, I've got some money, looking for a companion and also a wife." Marie's sister answered the ad for her, but the placer of the ad came to talk to her at a candy shop and then said, "All right, I like you, you like me, we can get married then, yeah?" That guy, as you've guessed, was Johann Hawk. So Johann Hawk immediately started administering arsenic to her. Now, it's amazing to me going through like the executive clemency file, how many high-placed people involved in the case did not believe that Hawk had actually poisoned her. And especially if you read the newspaper accounts about the inconsistencies, you can kind of get the impression why. Partly because the newspapers were a little bit squeamish. It seems that they were looking for arsenic that had been administered via the mouth and weren't really finding what they would expect in a situation like that. But really the fatal dose had probably been administered via enema. So Marie died in January of 1905. She was buried here in an unmarked grave at Oakwood Cemetery. The very day after the burial, Hawk married her sister, Amelia. But he didn't murder her, he just took her money and left the very next day. Newspapers got wind of the story pretty quick, started putting pressure on the cops, and within a day or so, they were exhuming the body. There is Inspector Shippey over there on the right. And here's coroner's physician Luca going through the organs in the jars. And they did eventually determine that most likely she had died of arsenic poisoning. Or at least the coroner's office did. Frankly, any coroner's report that when Peter Hoffman was the coroner should not be considered a serious document. But I really have no doubt that that's what happened in this case anyway. The one thing, they took a picture of the coffin when it was opened after they exhumed it. She'd been down there in the cold for a couple of days. I don't think she would have decomposed very much. So I'm not sure I want to see the picture. I'm not sure the picture survives. I thought the place it would have been most likely to be would have been with the coroner's report records. But the ones from back then in 1905, it just looks like this. At least part of this one is typed. The older ones that I was looking at from the 1880s, it's all just handwritten. Much harder to read. All right, of course, one thing I shouldn't totally neglect here as the legacy is there's also in the back there is the mound, the mass grave for Confederate soldiers who had died at Camp Douglas. And, you know, these were not like high-ranking Confederates. These were kids who'd been manipulated, lied to, drafted, and sent off to die. I don't object to them having a grave. Everybody gets a grave. But at the same time, I'd rather focus on the space right up, this thing right up here, which neo-Confederates call this the ugly stone. They hate this thing. Personally, I don't mind it one bit. I actually rather like this thing. This is a cenotaph, just a monument to people who are not actually buried here. Specifically, this is a monument to Southern abolitionists. There were such people. I mean, when South Carolina first seceded, their governor put out like a general message #1 in which he said, "Our first order of business must be to make a law punishing all abolitionists summarily and severely, if not with death. Any man who avows himself an abolitionist." So it was very dangerous to be an abolitionist in the South. The cenotaph, those unknown heroic men, once resident in the southern states, martyrs for human freedom, who at the breaking out of the Civil War refused to be traitors to the Union, who, without moral or material support, stood alone among ruthless enemies, and after unspeakable suffering either died at their post of duty or, abandoning home and possessions, sought refuge and scant bread for their families among the strangers of the North. To those pure patriots who, without bounty, without pay, without pension, without honor, went to their graves, without recognition even by their country, this stone is raised and sacrificed after 30 years waiting by one of themselves, an exiled abolitionist. Yeah, the neo-Confederate guys hate this thing. It refers to the Confederates as traitors. It refers to them being against human freedom. That was kind of their whole point. You know what I think of this. Here's a General Lee statue looking like Darth Maul here. Love that. Here's what I think of General Lee. Here's what I think of Jeff Davis. This about got me fired one time. Would have been worth it. But all right. You know, just in view of this, it's rather interesting to me that right in view of that mound, of the Confederate mound, is the mausoleum of John Johnson, who was the founder of Ebony and Jet magazine. First black man to appear on the Forbes 400. He was born in Arkansas in 1926, but then his parents came to the World's Fair in 1933 and thought, hey, this city's way better, let's move here. Ended up going to high school with Nat King Cole and Red Fox. I think Nat King Cole was a similar situation. His parents were so wowed by the 1933 World's Fair. Great monument, motto over the door. Failure is a word I don't accept. Now, probably his finest achievement was publishing the picture of Emmett Till in 1955. Emmett Till was a Chicago boy who had gone down south, allegedly whistled at a white woman and was tortured and killed for it. He ran a picture of the body in the casket, which kind of showed people just how bad things were down there. A lot of people were just kind of turning a blind eye to how bad things really were down in the South at the time. This kind of forced them to look. The people who had killed Emmett Till were quickly acquitted, even though they almost immediately basically admitted that they had done it. But lynching was not a federal crime at the time. It was just tried in their hometown, where they were as long as there was a jury, they were never going to get convicted. But lynching legislation has been holed up in the Senate for a long time. It's finally been passed just recently. But actually, one of the most prominent anti-lynching advocates and researchers is buried not far up here in the same cemetery. This is Ida B. Wells, Ida Wells Barnett. who was an anti-lynching advocate who initially came to Chicago to protest the 1893 World's Fair. I mean, at the time, they made sure they had representatives of every ethnic group, every state, every city. When they realized they didn't have anybody from Alaska, which was years from being a state, they scrambled and found a rep from Alaska, but did not have any not really have much of a black presence officially at the fair at all. Eventually, the exhibit from the nation of Haiti was about all of the black presence in the place. Frederick Douglass spoke officially as representing the government of Haiti. Eventually, the fair tried to host a Negro Day, but they were kind of iffy about it. It was like a day with free watermelon. It's kind of one of those, well, they were trying situations, but they just didn't do that great of a job. Initially, she thought that they should boycott the fair completely. Frederick Douglass thought, well, we might as well go and say our thing, even if we have to do it as representatives of the government of Haiti. But after the fair, she remained in Chicago for a long time. In the early 1910s, Harry Olson, the state's attorney who had been prosecuting Johann Hawk, appointed her as the first black woman to become a probation officer at the municipal court. He and Ida B. Wells were pretty close friends, but then she felt obligated to support Mayor Thompson for mayor, and even after Olson decided he was going to start running too, that kind of messed things up. Also, I can't imagine that Harry Olson's later advocacy for eugenics really helped much, though he was very remarkably open to saying, no, it's not about race, it's all just about your brain, and that's not connected to race. As eugenics go, it's all right, but still, we're talking about, the practice of selective reproduction. He wanted to, have all of the degenerates, as he called them, sent someplace else. Doesn't work too well. Let's just look at some other people. It's just tricky. We see a lot of people from back then accused of being into eugenics, and really it was just they advocated for birth control. That's about all it took at the time. There's a really nice looking one for Werner Kummel. He was an engineer who came to Chicago to work at the World's Fair. He was a big authority on gas and water works, helped save Hamburg from cholera in 1892. And he was all set to speak at the fair, but then he died in his hotel room. So the other engineers kicked in to give him a funeral and buy him a really nice gravestone here. Let's kick ahead a little bit here. Quite a number of interesting baseball people here. This is Cap Anson, one of the players identified by C. Montgomery Burns as the kind of guy you need on your team to win.
We'll give them token jobs at the plant and have them play on our softball team. Honus Wagner, Cap Anson, Mordecai Three-Finger Brown.
Sir?
What is it, Smithers?
So, Cap Anson played for the Chicago Cubs primarily during a 26-year major league career, 1871 to 1897. But even in exhibition games, he refused to play against black players. Even before the color line helped establish the color line, people who knew both him and Ty Cobb thought that Cap Anson was way worse than Ty Cobb. That's saying something, so we will not bother ourselves with him over much. Instead, we will move on here and skip ahead a little bit to Ted Double Duty Radcliffe. Known as Double Duty because he was both a pitcher and a catcher. A newspaperman said he was worth the price of 2 admissions to see him play. Now, he started the Negro Leagues playing for the Chicago American Giants, ended up with the Homestead Grays for a long time. Played exhibition matches against Ty Cobb. Roomed with Jackie Robinson for a while when he played with the Kansas City Monarchs. And this is him. He is in this, let me check my notes on where he is here in this picture. I got it written down in here. Oh, he's the third from the right. In the second row. Josh Gibson is in the picture here with him as well. There he is sometime later. Managed the American Giants in the 1950 and started hiring white players into what was left of the Negro League at the time. All the good black players were finally starting to get snatched up. He threw out a pitch for the Schaumburg Flyers, the minor league team, in 1999 when he was 96 years old, making him the oldest person to play a pro baseball game. And at the age of 100, threw out another one for the Sox. Behind him in the pick is Josh Gibson. And now that the Negro League records have been incorporated into the Major League records, he has the record single-season batting average. He hit .441 in 1943. We'll just cover one more because I had this in the picture. This is a monument to Kate Richardson. I don't think we know who sculpted this one. But Kate Richardson was the wife of a guy named Orlo Richardson, who died in 1890 at the age of 40. She came from Davenport, Iowa. And I did manage to find a wedding announcement for them. They did just right. Like sensible people determined on future happiness, our young friend O.W. Richardson and the accomplished Miss Kate Tiffany, sought the service of Reverend Mr. Lamb yesterday afternoon and were married. He said, "Are you married?" They said, "No, man." It is a noble example and worthy of emulation. We congratulate them. May their wedding tour be delightful, and the long and rugged pathway of life be strewn with flowers of unfading love, garlands of happiness, and satisfactory packages of greenbacks. It's always fun reading these old papers, and I thought that was their idea of great rhetoric at the time. But all right, everybody. That'll bring us up. I haven't posted next week's tour yet, so we'll find out what that's going to be pretty soon. In person, Saturday morning, I'm doing a thing called the Read and Run at Graceland, so I don't know quite how we're going to work out virtual tours. We'll figure something out, though. You know me, we'll figure something out. So welcome along, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining me. With that, I will just put up the thanks, and we'll hang out for a bit. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam for Mysterious Chicago Tours. And here's Benny. Thanks, Gene. Oh yeah, we should all be saying greenbacks more. And I don't give a damn about a greenback dollar. Spend it fast as I can. Kristen, you got it. That's a small group. They only had like 25 slots available for it. Unbedma, Lisa. Thanks, Steve. Yes, Barbara, Miles, and Priya have stockings as well. Ronnie puts up all of the Christmas stuff. I can take or leave the Christmas stuff. Though I did get some socks at the Chris Kindle Mark today. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Bridget. Oh, I'm tired today. Been a busy week. So many archives this week. No, Doreen, the kids caught me flicking off the Jefferson Davis statue at the Capitol one time and reported it back to their teacher, who told my bosses. And I think it would be unprofessional not to flick that guy off. Laura, yes, I got some Metallica tickets. Thank you, Cedric. I do intend to do this as a walking tour next season. I planned to do this year, I just didn't get it ready in time. Yeah, I didn't know the kids had caught me. I have the you know, that's not like that's the only time I ever flicked off a Confederate statue on a tour. Often they catch me, and usually I'm just like, they'll explain, here's why we're flicking these guys off. Would you like to flick them off? I'm fine with them flicking them off. Sue Metallica is going to be at Soldier Field. Thanks, Doreen. Tracy, that's a different one. No, Nicole, I thought they were dirt cheap. We're kind of at the nosebleeds, but it's a two-day show. They're doing 2 different concerts. You get a pass for both days, and I paid like $90. So it averages out to like $45 per ticket. That's nothing today. Yeah, the teacher was mad at me. She said she was kind of upset. Like, well, there's nobody in your class that he was fighting to keep in slavery. Or based on the statistics and the demographics, nobody in your town. Well, Kristen, there are those who say that they sold out when they first did a video in the late 80s. And then when the Black Album had so many accessible songs that everybody could enjoy. And you can say a lot of things about Saint Anger, but you can't say it was a sellout album. Or a good album. But it's a very honest portrait of where they were at the time. Good night, Christy. Now, there's a fine line between selling out and getting smart. How is my album doing? I've had almost a dozen streams. So, better than I expected anyway. Did Metallica ever sing Last Christmas? Not that I know of. The very next day. Gee, I don't know about doing it. I don't know. To me, all of the Christmas stuff is just clutter. Personally, Ronnie loves it. I gotta accept it to a certain extent. Where the hell are we gonna put a damn tree? Good night, Lisa. Barbara, enjoy. I've heard Twisted Sister's Christmas album is fun. I just don't really care for Christmas music personally, so... Working retail kind of traumatized me towards it. Well, Paula, I'm personally, I'm Jewish, so I don't feel that obligated to have a Christmas tree. I know we've got one out in the hall. Maybe that's enough. Gene, I don't think so. You've watched all that I've had to drink tonight. It wasn't like full or anything. Octavio, I saw the first episode and a half of Willow. And I realized I haven't seen that movie. I saw it twice in the theater. But that was 1988. So, it's been a while. I'm almost caught up on Andor now, I think. YouTube says we can find love on the new dating site repeatedly. That's a lot of the same comments. We're just gonna block that user. Yeah, we've definitely got people like around Sauganash like that. I'll show you some of them over the course of these upcoming mini tours. One of them, I think last year they had like a film strip up so they could show, or like a projector, so they had the Grinch playing on their garage constantly. The puppet by the fireplace is Hipster Bert. We're gonna bring over Hipster Bert to close out the show. Did you get your Spotify Wrapped this year? My top 5 were all people you've never heard of. Yeah. Really? Is that right, Hipster Bert? Well, who was your number 1 artist this year? Taylor Swift. Well, that was everybody's, right? Mine was Samia. But I've heard of her, so she's a sellout. Hipster Bert. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So thanks a lot for joining me today. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. We'll be back tomorrow morning with Find a Grave Friday. I have an idea who to look for, but I know they're not marked. And we just had enough trouble with that last week, so maybe I should find somebody a little bit easier. We'll find out. But all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks to everybody who's been joining the Patreon or kicking in. Once again, on the Patreon, you can follow the Johann Hawk book as it grows, as it's being written. So, thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, telling everybody to stay safe and stay strong. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, if at all possible, you gotta stay spooky, everybody. Have a great night.